Brooks flying around trying to figure out what the hell we're doing this morning out here in Los Angeles, California. Beautiful day. It's great living in Los Angeles, by the way. My name is Brooks Melchior, joined by Cam Smith, our producer, here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred every weekday at noon Eastern time, 9 o'clock out here on the West Coast. Perfect time of day to do a show. And glad to have you aboard. Coming up, the voice of the Patriots, Bob Socci, friend of the show, is back on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. Exciting. Looking forward to having Bob. Bob is just a prince, solid gold guy. Bob Socci is one of those guys, Cam, that just everybody likes. No one ever says anything, negative ever about one of those guys. I wish I could be that guy. I'm like the exact opposite. But so Bob's going to join us, and obviously we got the Instagram post, or as the kids call it, Gram post. See, I actually started calling Instagram Insta, right? Well, I'm glad I didn't do that around young people because they call it Gram. Instagram now, but Gram, right? That's not a reference to grandma. That's for old people out there like me. That's Instagram. Grandma's on Facebook, in case you don't know. But Tom Brady came out with a fascinating Instagram goodbye post for at least the season, and we'll read that to you here in a second. We also have some updates on Mike McCarthy spending the night at Jerry Jones' house. I mean, honest to God. First of all, Jerry Jones has a house. I just assumed the guy, he's got like a state. He's got like a county. He's got a house. That implies Jerry Jones has one house. One house. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, speaking of dummy owners, Dan Snyder interviewing guys in the Bahamas. I know you saw that, Cam. Cam Smith, our producer here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. Oh, and by the way, we may have Dennis Dodd coming up at CBS Sports. I hope we get him on the line. We'd love to have him. He's a great guy. And so if he pops up, one of my favorite guys, Kansas City guy, and Gates Barbecue guy in Kansas City. There's only one barbecue as far as I'm concerned. Don't listen to me if you ever go to Kansas City. There's too many places to go. We have Mexican food out here in Southern California. That's like barbecue in Kansas City. 5,000 barbecue restaurants. And like Clarence Hill Jr., who we talk barbecue with in Texas, covers the Cowboys beat, even though last time I blew it and didn't ask him about it. Jared Sandler, we talk about barbecue at Subway with the brisket from 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, right? We also talk barbecue with Dennis, because if you're talking to somebody who's in Kansas City, and Dennis lives in Overland Park, where my father, where I grew up in Overland Park. Fascinating, I know. But Dennis will perhaps join us coming up if he has time. He's got a very busy schedule. And love to have him, but he is one of those guys in college sports, college football. He is one of those guys that is always going to be, well, he's voting for something. He's voting for the Heisman. He's voting for the All-American. He's on a committee. He's in the association. He is the real thing. Bruce Feldman's one of those guys. Pete Thamel. This is college football we're talking about. They are the vanguard. Dan Wetzel, Pat Forty. I just ticked them off, right? That was pretty good. But don't sleep on Sports by Brooks. Don't sleep on us, because we've got some nuggets. And so I'm debating what to start off with, because there's just so much to talk about, right? But I'm thinking about starting with Mike McCarthy. And it's funny because, listen, I said it yesterday. I heard a bunch I actually heard someone on Fox Sports Radio. I'm not making this up. And I don't know if he was serious or not. He's a regular host. He goes on his show and he says, this was Monday. I think it was right after the games, right? On Monday. And he says, I was all raring to talk about what were 4 great games, close games over the weekend. One of the better playoff weekends in memory, right? And it was. And we talked about it. We talked about other stuff too, but But this host on Fox Sports Radio goes on the air and says, and I was all set to do this. He says it's on the air. But then the boss called and told us that we had to lead and discuss lead with the Mike McCarthy hiring by the Cowboys, that took place. Was that on Sunday or Monday? It was on Monday. Yeah, it was on Monday in the mid-morning, right? And Monday in the mid-morning hour, right? Exactly. And in other words, apparently that's when Jason Garrett, nobody really knows if Jason Garrett has been fired, period. Has he actually been fired? The greatest meme of the weekend, and there were a lot last weekend about the Cowboys situation. I want to talk about, there's a point to this. I want to talk about Mike McCarthy coming up because I've got a nugget for you as to why I think he got the job. All right. And we have some great stuff from Rex Ryan. Hopefully we'll get to it. I don't know how the schedule is going to play out, but I hope we're able to get to these clips today because, man, is he bitter, Rex Ryan, about not being an NFL coach. And he wants to be an NFL coach. And I'm not saying I don't like what Rex is saying on the air because I think he's telling the truth. He's the number one truth teller right now, at least when it comes to coaching vacancies, that whole business, because that's his life. And he's very much into it. And he very much wants to get a job as a head coach in the NFL going forward. But we'll play the comments he made about Rex Ryan doesn't get enough. I don't know if I want to use the word credit, but notoriety is the word. And if you've ever heard someone say the word notoriety, that's not a good thing. I'm not saying what he's saying is bad either, but it's not exactly, wow, what a revelation. But it is interesting and it is bitter and it is telling. And I enjoy him. I enjoy Rex Ryan very, very much, along with Dan Orlovsky, who I think is, if I had to list the number one star over at ESPN right now, rising star, Peter Burns and Dan Orlovsky. Peter Burns, Dan Orlovsky. Peter Burns should be the face of Peter Burns would be a great guy filling in for Peter Burns, by the way, he is on SEC Network. He's like the number 2 guy behind Feinbaum, but he's a friend of the show, been on several times. We'll have him on again. One of the best people I've ever met in the business. Great guy. But he really is a great guy. Class act. But man, that guy has transcendent talent as a talk show host, as a studio host. I just have to throw that out there. I'm one of those guys, a born agent, producer, that kind of a matchmaker. Love those guys. Orlovsky. And of course, Dan Orlovsky, been on the show as well. I consider him a friend of the show, even though he's only been on once. And the reason Dan Orlovsky, by the way, has only been on this show once, the reason is he's so damn busy. When we're on the air, he's on the air. I'll guarantee you we would have had him on several times by now. Cam and the audience, Dan Orlovsky. But he literally is like the busiest guy at ESPN before noon because he does Get Up and he does First Take. And he's great. So I digress, as always. But so this Mike McCarthy thing, right? So we have the Fox Sports Radio host, I'm going to wrap that up, saying, and that was the entree into this whole thing. The Fox Sports Radio host saying, I was going to talk about the games here on Monday. This was on Monday on Fox Sports Radio, this host. But my boss told me I had to talk about Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys, right? And so, look, we talked about McCarthy, of course. I mean, it's a breaking story. It's an NFL team. It's a popular NFL team. It's not America's team anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Not anymore. Though you would certainly think so by the indications we get from that Fox Sports Radio host and what his boss is telling him over at Fox. That's actually Premier Radio Networks, I'm guessing. Probably with Scott Shapiro, who has done a great job, by the way, at Fox Sports Radio. They have probably the best lineup they've ever had. So this is not a criticism. He knows what the hell he's doing. But That's ridiculous to drop those games and all of a sudden start talking about the Cowboys. And I don't know, Cam Smith, our producer. Cam, do you think that Jerry Jones, the timing of that hire was as such that he wanted to steal the limelight on that Monday from the games? I just can't see that. Really? You think? Definitely. You think he's well, you might be right. You know what? What am I thinking? I'm the one guy in the media who told you that Jason Garrett, I think I am the one guy who told you Jason Garrett's not going to get fired. And for all we know, he hasn't been fired. He's still there. And I was going to say, the best, man, I'm all over the place today. I got the allergic reaction last night, so a little medication going here today, folks. But as far as this hired, I was going to talk about the internet meme because I brought that up, the Twitter meme of Jason Garrett over the weekend. Somebody tweeted out, you talk about telling, you talk about saturation levels, right? Where everybody gets what seems like it would be kind of an inside joke. Somebody tweeted out, I don't know if you saw this, Cam, over the weekend. He tweeted out a photo of Jason Garrett that had a mustache, drawn on it, Jason Garrett's face, and funny glasses, right? And this photo of Jason Garrett was an announcement saying, please welcome the new Dallas Cowboys, Dallas Cowboys coach, Grayson Barrett. And it was, of course, there's Jason Garrett in disguise. But so I see that, right? This is over the weekend, and we're still playing limbo. By the way, we're going to run this here in a second. This clip of ESPN's report on January 2nd of Ed Werder, who, by the way, I don't really blame in this situation, and Ed does a pretty good job, so no problem with him. But we're going to point some things out as far as this Cowboy situation goes that you probably don't know because you don't live it the way we do. Of course, nobody else is going to tell you either. That's why you come here. But man, it was, so I'm looking at that, and there's about a half second where you're like, okay, what's the joke here? The joke is Jason Garrett will not leave. And so there's this announcement from the Cowboys. He's in a disguise and they've changed his name to Grayson Barrett, or maybe Jason did it himself. I mean, it's a joke, right? It's a meme. By the way, is that a catch-all word or what? Meme. Everything's a meme. Whatever's not nailed down, it's a meme, right? Over there, right? That book over there laying there, that's a meme. That chair, that's a meme. Everything's a meme now. It's the catch-all word of the moment. So if you're old and you're not sure, don't worry about it. Just call whatever a meme, like me. Because there's still kind of a disconnect because there really is no distinct meaning of a meme. Yeah, so I guess you saw this photo, Cam Smith, our producer, of Jason Garrett that had been doctored up and stuff. So there was about, now, Cam, was there like a half second where you said, wow, that's kind of funny. That's clever, but I don't think anybody else will get it. And then you looked at the tweet and there were like 200,000 likes on it. Everybody got the joke. Everybody. And that was a kind of involved thing. It's not like, it was a joke. And the implication was that Garrett wouldn't leave and was going to disguise himself if he had to do that to keep the job and pass himself off as a coach, or maybe the Cowboys would do that, blah, blah. Well, that's not out of the realm of possibility. We're hearing now, oh my God, this is just too much. You know what? We got to run this Rex Ryan clip. We got to start it off with Rex Ryan because, and just to finish up the thing about the host that was forced by his boss, Fox Sports Radio, to do the Mike McCarthy thing. pardon my French, that's bullshit. That was an amazing weekend of games, incredible storylines. I mean, amazing. I think a big part of perhaps that reaction, and Fox Sports Radio, they're not alone, but Fox really is over the top in the over promotion. Now Fox can't hold a candle to ESPN when it comes to JJ Watt, because nobody can. They need to promote JJ Watt a little bit more than they did in the last game. Wow. What's funny about that, by the way, the JJ Watt stuff and the over promoting of these networks of the NFL. I mean, ESPN is so over the top. Whatever they're doing, doesn't matter. College football, Jesus. It's just this mythologizing, glorification. I'm telling you, this is a sports talk show host. I love college football. I love tradition. I love the fight song. I love Ugga and my Georgia Bulldogs. I love to hate Nick Saban, right? I love college football history. I told you, I think it was yesterday, when they built the 80,000 seat Yale Bowl in 1914, they forgot to put the bathrooms in. So I love college football, but holy man, I can't take ESPN. I really can't. Fox is, I actually prefer Fox on a lot of things with Urban Meyer's analysis and things. I will say this though about ESPN, not because he's a friend of the show, not because he's my friend. That may sound ridiculous, but Kirk Herbstreit, man, he is, I don't know, maybe I just hadn't been watching that closely the last few years. Dude, this year, he's been pretty damn good. And it's that broadcast, when it comes to analysis, I want to know what you think, Cam Smith. You don't have to, go along with me, what you think of Kirk Herbstreit, because I personally think, you could make the argument he's the best game analyst in the business right now. I think, obviously Rome was in that category, but Jesus, it's like the Dallas Cowboys. It's like ESPN promoting college football. Tony, I don't even want to say his name. It's so overdone. It's not his fault, right? Tony Romo. Oh, he did it again. Predicted the play. Who cares? Why is that something that earns you $10 million? Because it does. Because it's the NFL. You're there. That's fine. You show up, you're going to make that. That's fine. but man, I get sick of Tony Romo. So you got Romo there. And let me finish this point, and then we'll go on to Rex Ryan. And again, we're going to have Bob Socci, the voice of the Patriots, on. I'm looking forward to that. Bob's a good dude. And we're going to kick it around. And we're going to read this Instagram post from Tom Brady against my better judgment. Tom, why would you really listen to anything Tom Brady, what he's saying in public? Let's face it, folks, it's a charade. It's all kind of like superficial, coded language. You'll drop a hint in there. And usually if there is a hint, it's not done deliberately. We're watching Belichick. And for the first time in my life, I watched Bill Belichick, his entire press conference on I think it was Monday. Not after the game, because he does too. Those guys do so much media. Belichick does a lot of media. He's got his own radio show, which is shocking, but awesome at the same time. But I watched the whole Bill Belichick press conference, and man, I don't know how the Boston media does it. I don't know how you guys out there in Boston contain yourselves. I really don't. It is literally one of those things where every question, when you watch that press conference, anybody who's covered the team more than 2 minutes with the Patriots or knows anything about what's going on, right? And they're not going to get a question if they don't know what's going on, unless it's the Super Bowl. You notice this, Cam, every question, initially when the question is asked, posits the response that Bill Belichick would give to that question and then move on. But because the questioner gives Bill Belichick's dismissive response or whatever observation it is that Belichick would otherwise offer in response to the question that's about to be asked, well, Belichick has to kind of make a better attempt to answer the question. So when you ask a question of Bill Belichick, if you want any chance of getting anything, and that's already minute, tiny, right? Of you getting anything. It's funny because I'm watching that, and believe me, I've been at a lot of press conferences, and I do, that's what we do here. We do media analysis. So we got a pretty good eye, trained ear. And I'm watching that press conference, and I'm watching this, particularly about Brady. We ran these clips back, I think, on Monday on this show. The first couple times I watched that comment, I was like, that's nothing. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Then the Boston media reported on it and said, ooh, Belichick kind of gave us a nugget on this. So I went back and listened. I'm like, yeah, he did kind of say that, well, it's not all about Tom, folks. Pump the brakes. It's collective decision, right? That kind of thing. It was an interesting comment. And of course, as if you were watching the show, we talked about this. The only reason that he gave that answer was a woman, a female, an outstanding reporter, Karen Gurigan, just asked him this amazing question where she gave Bill's answer before she asked the question or in the midst of the question. I'm serious. Every single question of Bill Belichick, unless it's a really short one about somebody's availability or something, every single question of Bill Belichick, right? If it's more than 5 seconds, starts off with providing Bill's otherwise curt answer to that question, and then he moves on and you don't get the question answered. The questioner provides that answer. Bill, we already know that this is what you would normally say, but please don't say it this time. Please actually make an effort. It's hilarious. I mean, I can't remember a situation like, I got to give the Boston media credit. I mean, they found a way. They find a way to get something. But I mean, I know people are getting paid, and I know it's sponsors and all that stuff. And believe me, I know. I mean, in college sports, when you're a college football coach and you're getting paid $1 jillion, well, that's because Goody's headache powder and, Sports Radio 1710 in Huntsville is paying Nick Saban $8 million of the $10 million to do a stupid radio show, right? The fix is in, right? And he gets another $1 million from Nike, or more than that, probably, whatever shoe they wear, right? So I recognize the importance of from a financial standpoint. It employs a lot of people, but it sucks. Bill Belichick doesn't need to do a press conference. He never says anything. I mean, literally, would it be a big deal if he didn't do a press conference? Right. That said, I'm not so sure that Bill doesn't really kind of enjoy. I mean, he enjoys being a coach. I mean, he's been in it forever, and he's a human being. The thing about Belichick that's so interesting, that makes him a fascinating figure to me, is he is such an engaging, and I know you've all seen it. He's such an engaging. I didn't plan on talking about Bill Belichick for 20 minutes, but I'm so fascinated by him because he is such an engaging person and can be such a warm person, and, has a lot of depth to him. And I think a lot of people don't give him credit for that because of his the way he is answering questions in public and things like that. Forget about that. That's not Bill Belichick. That's my whole point, though. It's like embarrassing. Why are we even doing this? And look, there's that one time out of 500,000 questions where Belichick might slip up, didn't do it on purpose, right? That's where we are. Yes, that's where we are. That's how it works. That's why Sports by Brooks on Fancred every weekday, noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific, on this wonderful mobile streaming platform that has given us this incredible venue to bring you this information. I mean, this is freaking amazing. It's awesome to be able to bring what we're bringing to you, the insight that nobody is bringing, legitimate insight, the commentary nobody's bringing, because everybody works for a network, right, that makes all its money from the leagues and the teams. And so they're terrified to say anything substantive about those leagues and teams if it's in any way negative. Now, they'll make superficial negative comments. They'll go after players, but nothing really that's actually candid, interesting that you would say to your friend at lunch. That just doesn't exist. That's why I'm so happy to be able to come on and do a show. You know what it is? We're adults. We're adults. We don't have to pretend. This isn't. I'm listening to, and Colin Cowherd's fine. He does a decent job, amongst talk shows. He's going on and on about, we're going to get, and I get what he's saying, and I understand that it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're going to give you an NFL meat sandwich. He repeats that like 27 times. Of course, I repeat things too, way too much, but NFL meat sandwich. And but what I want to do is I want to start off, I want to talk about Mike McCarthy, how he got the job. And I want to also talk a little bit about, we're going to talk about the Patriots. We got to get to these damn clips before Bob comes on. I did this yesterday when we didn't get to the damn clips. So let's start off with Rex Ryan on ESPN. And this was Monday when they found out that McCarthy had been hired. And here's Rex Ryan on Get Up responding.
I don't think it's that good. The resume does look good. You mentioned 9 playoffs and 13 things.
Pretty good odds.
Well, yeah, it is pretty good. But if Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback, I don't think it's that good. So to me, it's like, God, dog, I would have killed to have had these guys. Now this guy's going to inherit that. I don't know. He got to deal with God or something. Because this is a great
bitter man, Rex Ryan.
I do. And here's what he's going to do.
Remember, he wants an NFL job.
About is Jason Witten. That's going to be the guy they're going to groom. This guy's going to be in here for about 2 or 3 years. They're going to give the job to Jason Witten. He'll move forward. But when I look at this right here, he's got to keep Kellen Moore and all that. Why? He's got the #1 offense in the league. They've done a great job there. He's going to bring in somebody else to run the defense. All right, and that'll be fine. It'll probably be Dom Capers or somebody else. Who cares? But when I look at that, this is like this hire was on paper looks good, but I don't think it's not the future that you talked about. And it's not a sexy hire by any stretch to me because you didn't win. You were like the rest of us when you never had Aaron Rodgers. Guess what happened to you? Won, 4 games, 3 games?
Is Rex a bitter guy, or is it me,
so
Cam?
How great a coach are they?
Or does he sound really bitter?
The analytics
or whatever.
I thought was garbage when he came out and said,
but it's like over the top.
This kind of stuff. You're going to embrace it. You better have an offensive line and a running game, which you do. So, hey, you're going to go for it on 4th down.
Embracing it,
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't disagree with anything he said. And, why don't we just leave it at that? Cam and I had this conversation off the air beforehand. I placed that in the context of, Rex is trying to get an NFL job, which is a little weird because he's not in the ballpark these days. It's going to take a really good friend, to be in a position to be able to get him a job. And so who knows? Joe Judge got a job. Speaking of Joe Judge, why don't we run that clip about Joe Judge? Because Burt Breer is so great. Friend of the show, Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback. Support that guy, Albert Breer. Nobody works harder than he does over at Sports Illustrated. Albert Breer, do you have that clip of him talking about, I believe it's a clip about, or is it about Tom Brady? Man, I am scatterbrained today. Let me find that clip from, thank you for confirming that he is bitter, because I was like a little taken aback only because he's trying to get that job. He's trying to get a head coaching job. And it's not like Rex hasn't had opportunities. It's not like Rex hasn't had talent himself and kind of done and had done nothing with it. But let's take a look. Oh yeah, this is on Joe Judge, the mystery coach. He's not a mystery to the people with the Patriots, but here's Albert Breer on Joe Judge.
Tell the Giant fan a little bit about what their next head coach is all about.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a very clear move that happened this time last year that tells you what Bill Belichick thought of Joe Judge. Joe's been the special teams coordinator there for a while, and I think to some degree he was like a lot of other special teams coordinators, a little frustrated that maybe he wasn't getting a sniff as much to be a head coach. And so, Bill recognized this guy as a head coach down the line, an NFL head coach down the line. And he did for Joe Judge what Andy Reid did for John Harbaugh in 2007. And, a lot of people sort of gloss this over, but, John Harbaugh was in this spot, 13, 14 years ago. And his last year in Baltimore, or his last year in Philadelphia, Andy Reid moved him over and had him as a secondary coach. And boom, the next year he winds up getting a head coaching job. And so Belichick basically did that for Joe Judge. And he said, okay, I know you need to get some experience on one side of the ball or the other, and not just on special teams, maybe to entice some of these teams to come and look at you. So I'm going to give you that. And made him the wide receivers coach. And what do you know? All of a sudden now, a year later, he's in the mix the same way Harbaugh was after 1 year.
How about that? How about Belichick? Now, again, we talked about it a second ago, and it's not exactly breaking news. He's like two different people. And that's a stand-up guy. If that's what happened, I have no doubt that's what happened. That getting Judge, an opportunity, as a position coach helps his resume. And of course, nobody has more cred, you would think, than Bill Belichick, but things haven't exactly worked out well for his progeny coaches for the most part. Vrabel being a notable exception these days. But I can't, by the way, and I love that Cam Smith is our producer, because you may not know, but there's nobody more knowledgeable about college football than he is, literally. That's saying something when I'm saying it. And, but so when you look at Belichick and I'm not saying Joe Judge is going to fail, but maybe I am saying he's going to fail. Look at all the guys that have come out of that program that it hasn't worked out. Nick Saban, same thing. And Mike Locksley, what a disaster at Maryland this year. Not that it wasn't something that if you paid any attention to his career at all, right? At all, you're not surprised at all what happened at Maryland. But remember Maryland and of course, Ohio State was coached by Urban Meyer and they struggled on defense 2 years ago. But remember that Maryland-Ohio State game 2 years ago? That was the best college football regular season game probably 2 seasons ago. Unbelievable game. It was like 91-90, right? So now you've got and Matt Canada doesn't get the job, the interim guy, after DJ Durkin thankfully gets blown out. I don't know if you saw this, by the way, DJ Durkin, real fast, hired as an assistant by Lane Kiffin. Man, we got to get Dennis done. Dennis is like, God, there's like so many things going on. We're going to get him back on. We got to get him on. We got to get, our college football groove on, because there's so many things to talk about. And that's one of them. DJ Durkin, the monster, and he is a monster. Not that he's alone in that, in the college football ranks. And man, I don't want to, I'm thinking back today, man, I'm starting to sound like Rex Ryan, aren't I? And I'm not even trying to get jobs. But so Durkin gets the gig at Ole Miss. And I think it was Nicole Arbach. She might have, from The Athletic, a great college football writer, who brought up, I didn't know this. Cam, I know you knew it. I know you knew it when you saw this over the weekend, or remembered it. I guess when the Maryland football players, University of Maryland football players under DJ Durkin, you remember the coach at Maryland when Jordan McNair died, and was fired but wasn't going to be fired, and it was a total disaster. And actually, I think got a lot of people fired in the administration, or I think amongst the board of trustees at Maryland. It was a huge fall. It was like Chernobyl of coaching situations at Maryland. But come to find out, and I guess this was in an article about Durkin a couple of years ago. I still can't believe these are the kinds of things you never dreamt you would actually have coming out of your mouth. when the Maryland football players would play, and I played football at the University of Georgia. Yeah, it was in the 90s. Yeah, it was a long time ago. But I've been around a lot of teams since then, covered college football for 25 years here at SC, at Ohio State, at the very highest level. I've been around, right? So in this story, during breakfast, when the team would have breakfast at the University of Maryland, the football team, they would be shown these super ultra violent, and I mean ultra violent videos. They would have it up on the screens, like crazy stuff, like sticking. I think one of them was, and I'm not going to go through them because they're so gross and stupid and ridiculous and absurd. And that isn't to say that there isn't a lot of stupid, gross, violent, dumb things that happen in college football with coaches, assistants, and there. I lived it, so I saw it. It's a barbarous situation at times. It's the nature of the game. But so it was sticking pins in eyeballs. Cam, did you hear about this story over the week? I know you know this probably, but did you hear that came out in the aftermath of Lane Kiffin hiring DJ Durkin? Why would you hire DJ Durkin? Why? For what possible? And listen, Marvin Lewis just did his obligatory. Marvin, why aren't there any black coaches, head coaches in the NFL? Why aren't there more head coaches names out there who are black? What happened to the obligatory thing that has to come up, right? And thankfully it does. And I mentioned Eric Bieniemy the other day, and I'm not saying Eric Bieniemy is not going to get a job, but Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator at Kansas City, under the freaking oracle of offense and quarterback play, Andy Reid. Maybe not clock management, but Andy Reid is an offensive freaking genius. If I had one game where you had to score points, no matter who was playing, I mean, wouldn't you pick Andy Reid as your offensive coordinator? Matt Moore this year, Matt Moore didn't even skip a beat. It was like it wasn't even that big of a deal. But any other team, you saw what happened to the Jets. It's like a total disaster when they lose their quarterback. It's like the Titanic going down. Yeah, Eric Bieniemy is a guy, and man, you talk about a guy who's paid his dues. You talk about a guy with bona fides. Now, I don't really know if he is a great coach. I don't have that knowledge. I probably should call around about it, right? And ask around. I could probably find out a little bit about him. And you never really can find out everything unless you're there in the trenches with a guy or know people really well who are there. And of course, you're never going to see an NFL owner do that kind of due diligence when they're hiring somebody. So in a sense, that bodes well for everybody because there's never going to be legitimate due diligence. See Mike McCarthy, who was just hired. The sexy pick. I heard people saying that. The Super Bowl ring. I mentioned the Super Bowl. That's why he was hired. He was hired because that Super Bowl ring on Mike McCarthy's hand, and I'll almost guarantee you, we got to ask our Dallas guys like Kevin Turner. I think he's coming on Friday from 105.3 The Fan. If McCarthy's wearing around his suit, you got to believe he is. When he spent the night at Jerry Jones' house. What, Jerry Jones only has like one house? It's like, that's just weird to hear. Jerry Jones's house, Mike McCarthy, according to Adam Schefter, spent the night last night. Or no, he spent the night during this 8-day bender. I said it. I called it a bender. Every day is Jerry Jones's is a bender. Come on. Guy's a walking chemistry stat. All right. In my opinion. So, yeah, at Jerry Jones' house, McCarthy spent the night. I mean, wouldn't I was going to get into this, and because I've been so all over the place today, man, that is one thing I would just love to do. That is a bucket list thing. Go over to Jerry Jones' house. Folks, it's an estate. It's a compound. It's not a house. So I wouldn't think so. Maybe we should look into that. We got to get our Dallas guys on that. what are they here for, right? So now we're going to talk some Patriots with gold-plated standard of the broadcasting business, the gold standard, I guess is what I was trying to say. Bob Socci, who's a lot more articulate than I am, trust me, and longtime voice of the Patriots. And I have to ask him, and we'll bring Bob up here in a second with our producer, Cam Smith. He's going to be joining us from Boston here in a moment to talk about the aftermath of what happened over the weekend, what's going on with personnel. We'll call it that right now. But of course, it's Tom Brady, Joe Judge, Bill Belichick. Man, I mean, it never ends. And one thing that I find really refreshing about the Patriots is compared to the Cowboys. All right. What's going on with the Patriots to me is every bit as compelling, if not much more compelling, for obvious reasons. Obvious. All right. The term dumpster fire was, if it was ever going to be invented for something, the Cowboys would probably be, a good reason to invent that term, dumpster fire, because they've been a dumpster fire for over 2 decades. And so, but with the Patriots, I mean, they are legit, and they're not running around telling you that they're legit. They're not selling you. They're not doing PR stuff that they're pretending isn't PR. That's the Cowboys. That defines the Cowboys. And I think it's a good sign for all of us here as well. If you're an American that happens to be watching, if you're not, that's great. I'm glad you're watching wherever you are around the world. Or maybe you're not an American, you're inside the borders today and hanging out with us today, and welcome. But the fact that the Patriots, right, are all merit, and Bill Belichick, if he didn't have to do another press conference, would never do another one. But you've got an owner with the Cowboys, Jerry Jones. That's his thing. So that's what I do appreciate with the Patriots. It's been a remarkable run. And Bob, first of all, Happy New Year. I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Happy New Year, Brooks.
And man, I am excited to talk to you because, and we talked a lot about the Cowboys and McCarthy, and that's fine. All right. It's all the sizzle. It's not the sizzle, but the Patriots are this damn sizzle. And that's the great irony. To me, it's stunning, Bob. This is me talking. All right. It's stunning that we're doing the talk show on Monday, and I'm listening to talk shows around town, and they're talking about Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys on Monday. I mean, that's like the lead. What? Why? To me, I mean, you had 4 great games. You could leave with any of those games, but the Patriots, Tom Brady, this is the kind of thing, Bob, that happens like once in my life, these transcendent players, and we'll see what happens. But what are your thoughts about what happened in that game? And just coming out of the game, what are you thinking about that game these days as we're sitting here talking to you?
Well, first, I had to get myself centered in the phone camera. I didn't want us to eavesdrop or be voyeurs for our next door neighbors across the way. But it is interesting to compare and contrast the two organizations, particularly since the Cowboys were a dynasty, under Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, who had a big influence, I think, on how Bill Belichick continued to build the Patriots organization as their friendship flourished. But with regards to the Pats and Tom Brady, interesting times to say the least, Brooks.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's something that I touched on a second ago, forgot to bring up in a timely fashion, but I'll bring it up now. America's team. And I grew up with that. And I grew up in Kansas City, and the Chiefs were terrible. And I actually kind of gravitated towards the Cowboys when I was young growing up. And that star, they were America's team. But much like and this was the Landry era for the most part. That's how old I am. But I think you could make an analogy there between the kind of stoicism and the approach that the Cowboys had at that time. They didn't win as much, but they were always there in the thick of things in the championship race almost every year. And what the Patriots have, I'm just trying to, it's like a riddle wrapped inside an enigma, trying to decipher what everybody is doing and what everybody's. And here's, I want to run this by you. Let me give you this theory. All right. This is my opinion. Bill Belichick flat doesn't want Tom Brady back. And the reason he doesn't want Tom Brady back is, unlike in the past, Tom Brady, when he doesn't have a lot of weapons, you need weapons, period. I recognize that to win. But Tom Brady in the past was just athletic enough, was just improvisational enough athletically to make plays when they kind of had to make them in the breach. And he doesn't have that anymore. And Bill Belichick is as pragmatic a person, and as calculating a person as there is. Now, this is dummy in Los Angeles theory, throwing that out there. I mean, am I onto something or am I wrong?
Well, let me go back first to the Cowboys analogy, because I think it's one of the interesting things about the relationship between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick for these last 2 decades. You'll recall that when Pete Carroll was the head coach, Robert Kraft learned a couple of things in particular about that experience. He went back to a coach who was a disciplinarian, someone from the Parcells family who he had a good relationship with while Belichick was an assistant here in New England. But he also took the lessons learned from ownership involvement in personnel and personnel decisions, and fully entrusted Bill Belichick with the reins, in essence, to control this organization, have everything go through the head coach, and give him the autonomy to build the roster from the start back in 2000, which Belichick did, of course, and has sustained for these last 2 decades. And I think that's a very important distinction between Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, the general manager of the Cowboys, of course.
And I made it.
And an owner who holds weekly press conferences immediately after the game. It was really amazing to see. I knew it happened, but it was amazing to see in the bowels of Gillette Stadium, Jerry doing that after the Cowboys played against the Patriots. And I think that session really continued the Cowboys on a course that really led to a spiral late in the year when he criticized his head coach and his team immediately after that game against the
Patriots. Doesn't even matter, Bob. It doesn't even matter if he compliments the team. Just doing that stuff undermines the coach. Sorry about that.
Right. And so that takes us to where we are today with Belichick, Robert Kraft, Tom Brady. And your point that you made, or your theory, is one that I've seen espoused. I think yesterday was Joe Thomas, the former NFL player.
I'll take that. I'll hang out with Joe.
I believe it was Joe. He's done a great job as an analyst. Really witty guy and a very smart football man, and like a rocket tackle for all those years with the Browns. And I have said it this week on radio here is, there has long been a characterization, especially in local talk circles, that Bill Belichick wants to win a championship without Tom Brady, prove that he can win one without Tom Brady. And, again, that's taken as, I think, an assumption on the part of a lot of people, though it has never come from Bill Belichick himself. I always think, and again, this is just my own gut feeling, having been around this organization closely now for 7 years, but not being an insider, that, the best way to phrase how Bill Belichick looks at everything is, what's the best way to win a championship, period. And if he thinks that Tom Brady is the best quarterback to do that going forward next year and the following year at this point, then Tom Brady will be back here. If he wants to, move on from Tom Brady, it's not. And again, I'm in the minority in some media circles locally. I don't know about I can't speak for everybody, but then there may be more of a likelihood than a possibility that the Patriots move on. That's the football part of it. And I can understand Belichick and the Patriots have always been ahead of the curve when it comes to the game on the field. And you look at the direction the league has gone, the trend of NFL teams and NFL offenses, but also important to note from the high school ranks to the college ranks, the trends there. The game has really gone from the bottom up in terms of the way it's played. I don't know if you'd agree with that. The college offenses impacting the way NFL coaches now handle these young players, from offensive linemen to skilled players, and especially at the quarterback position. You also look at the fact that Patriots have gone 22-9 in the last 31 games. 5 of those 9 losses have been against former Belichick players or assistants, including 2 losses to Mike Vrabel's Titans, 1 to Brian Flores, 1 to Bill O'Brien, Matt Patricia last year.
Secrets out.
And so I think, they always try to change their tendencies. Nobody self-scouts better than the Patriots. But again, I think that's a factor you have to consider. How much do they want to evolve the offense and move it in a different direction? But having said all that, I also think that it comes down to cost value, and that's ultimately what it is when the decision is made on a lot of these guys. And I think if Tom Brady is willing to take a deal with Robert Kraft, I think having the interest, as he said to Peter King, he'd like to see Tom Brady retire as a Patriot. And I don't believe that Bill Belichick has made up his mind. And I don't think Tom Brady knows what's going to happen. I don't think any of us know what's going to happen. But I do think that, and this is probably my heart talking more than my head or my gut. But I think in the end, if there's not an offer that's out there elsewhere in a market that suits Tom Brady personally and professionally, because I can't foresee him wanting to go somewhere just to get paid but not have a chance to win. But he's a guy who's taken less than market value at quarterback. He's earned the right to go shop himself out on the open market and then come back to the Patriots and see if there's an interest. I still believe, based on what he said himself the other night, not what other people have said through, the back channels from the various camps and, various people around him, that nobody knows. He doesn't know. Bill, I think, is going to formulate the decision that he thinks is in the best interest of the team. And ultimately it comes down to, what's out there, and would Robert Kraft be willing to match it or at least approximate it enough, with also, I think, the promise, or at least, the indication that the Patriots will fortify their offense around him. That's just the way I feel.
It's ironic in a way, and I think this every time I think of the Patriots, how, we love our quarterbacks, we love our dynasties, we love our Hall of Famers. Tom Brady is as extraordinary a resume and profile as anyone who's ever played the game, certainly in my lifetime. And how the heck is he not going to retire a Patriot? And this is me. How is it that the Patriots aren't going to at least make some manner of gesture to him financially? It's easy, and you should never say, don't you have enough money, Tom? But when I do hear Tom, or not Tom, but I hear or see reports coming out, it doesn't mean they're legitimate, about money just in the last 2 or 3 weeks that Brady would like a representative deal, a little bit more of a representative deal that he's had in the past. Now, if he's going to stick around with the Patriots, that comes off to me talking as he's looking for a gesture here more than anything. Not that the money's not important. It is, of course, and it isn't my place to judge that. But what I really want to know is a guy that's been there, been at practice, watch the reps, watch Brady. Tell me about Brady's performance that, as you saw it beginning to end. Is Tom Brady in decline physically?
Well, he's had injury issues, as have been reported, not only this year, but the last couple of seasons. And I think there have been a lot of challenges that are beyond his control and also unrelated to his physical state. Offensive line this year with the injury to David Andrews and at left tackle, the tight end position. They had a drop off not only from Rob Gronkowski, but Dwayne Allen when it comes to helping to protect
disaster
him
on offense.
You look at the tight end position for the Patriots this year, and then the wide receiver group, which was similar to last year, but they overcame it last year because they had the capability of becoming a power running team late in the year. And this year they weren't able to reinvent themselves and get anything going with consistency in the second half of the year. But I still think when you look at Brady in particular, the pocket movement, a couple of games, he was ducking and dodging, going back to the Philadelphia game to avoid hits. Buffalo in week 16, some of the plays he made against the Titans, some of the throws he made against the Titans, the throw to Benjamin Watson early, another throw to Julian Edelman in that game. The arm strength is still there. Certainly the work ethic is there. I think the agility within the pocket, if anything, to me over the last few years, it's at least remained the same and quite possibly in some ways has improved. Now, there are other aspects of it, the consistency, the inaccuracy at times, particularly in week 17 against the Miami Dolphins. Those are factors, but also those could be very much related to, not sure if, why is the running back in the flat right next to Julian Edelman when the ball is coming out of my hand and it's an airmail throw that gets picked
this
off.
Last game, he was accurate. This last game,
he was very accurate. This last game, yeah, no question about it, Brooks. So I think that Tom Brady is still a championship level quarterback, and I still think he's in the handful of the very best quarterbacks in the league. You look at Patrick Mahomes. And, the way he's played these last couple of years for Kansas City. And then I think back to last year when they met in the postseason, it was Tom Brady who again showed he was superior in that AFC Championship. Now, the Patriots ran the ball a lot more, and Mahomes was terrific. There were throws Mahomes missed. Granted, he's a rookie. Tom Brady, though, when the Patriots needed him most, 3 times on 3rd and 10, delivered strikes. When they needed him in the Super Bowl, even though the Rams presented a lot of problems and challenges for him, when they needed him to make the biggest throws of that game, in the biggest game, of course, he did. He got that scoring drive to go ahead, started with a beautiful throw to Gronkowski, and then really set up the winning touchdown with an even better throw to Gronk down the left sideline over 2 defenders in front of the third. So I think the ability is still there. Health could be a question, and I think it comes down to, my partner on local radio, Scott Zolak, just said it on our flagship here in Boston, that, he thinks that Brady's likely to come back, which is kind of a change in his tune, honestly, over the course of this year. And as those guys were discussing the situation, maybe the length of the contract, a commitment to Tom Brady that, hey, you're going to be the guy for 2020 and 2021. You got to understand, we're going to bring in the next guy if it's not Jarrett Stidham already. But if there's that kind of commitment, maybe there's a willingness to take less. But I think the last couple of contracts he's negotiated, he certainly has taken less.
We're visiting with Bob Socci, longtime voice of the New England Patriots here on SportsbyBrooks on Fancred. And so I'm the last person who would be a Patriots apologist. I'm a disinterested but fascinated third party, disinterested whether or not they win. But here's another dummy theory, no inside knowledge, just throwing it out there. The offensive personnel for the Patriots was nothing short of a disaster. That said, I don't think you can really blame anybody in the Patriots organization necessarily, at least really blame them, because they had a lot of bad breaks, like the way Gronk treated them and kind of misled them, and they weren't really sure what was going to happen, and they got left out in the cold there. But there's a lot of those things. They missed on a draft pick and some important draft picks. But what I was going to ask you was, when you look at the 12 wins in the regular season, and I think Tom Brady did an amazing job with what he had, that offensive line, people just have not talked about enough, which is very ironic when it's Tom Brady and the whole situation. But how many of those wins, or how much of the 12 wins and the great season the Patriots had, at least in the standings, would you ascribe to Tom Brady? Because everybody talks about the defense. What was Brady's role in it?
Well, I think you look at the first half of the season, they dominated a lot of teams with their defense. They were also going against Luke Falk, for example, from the Jets, in his first NFL start, in his second game, I think, dressed as an NFL quarterback. The defense certainly dominated. The defense was the story, along with special teams, which wound up blocking 4 punts this year, a couple of them leading directly to touchdowns. I think you look at the caliber of the competition, they didn't need Tom Brady to win those games. But one of the things I think that Tom Brady did exceptionally well all year long, and even as they struggled so mightily, and it was really the one area of deficiency that came back to haunt them most, I think, in the AFC wildcard round, when they struggled mightily in the red zone. The way Tom Brady managed things, you look at the completion percentage, one of the lowest of his careers, and certainly the lowest in a long, long while. Well, how many of those incompletions were Tom Brady avoiding the kind of disastrous throw that could have spelled
in more ways than one?
Might have spelled the difference, no question about it. And I think about that Eagles game that I mentioned, and that was the game after which Tom Brady took a lot of criticism locally because of his demeanor, his comportment at the podium, very dejected, some said sulking, pouting after losing to the Eagles. And I said at the time on local radio, you can question the comportment, but the message is pretty clear to me. It's not that Tom Brady doesn't like the fact that they're winning with defense. It's that he's concerned about the way they're winning with their defense and not generating enough offense to give them anything but a very thin margin for error. And they played throughout the second half with a very thin margin for error against better teams. And that was the end result. It was a 1-point game in essence in the wild card round. The Chiefs, the Texans, the loss to Miami, even although that game really never should have been close. Nonetheless, you look at those defeats for this team down the stretch, and they didn't have a margin for error, and ultimately came back to haunt them.
I can't thank you enough for all this time. I got 2 more questions for you. I'm going to ask you about Joe Judge, but I want to talk to you. You literally took the words out of my mouth because I was going to ask you about the Eagles press conference. because I was like everybody else, pitchforks and torches. Tom is finally selfish. This is the real Tom. Man, I look at that Instagram post. You talk about the guy's amazing. He's unbelievable. He's so consistent in his comport. That is the word of the day, especially as it pertains to a guy like Tom Brady. He's maddeningly consistent in everything that he does publicly. It's phenomenal. And he doesn't give, and I'm not an apologist at all. That's just a disinterested third party. But man, I go back to that press conference now. And is it, I don't know how you felt about it, but this is just me talking. But I've kind of, and in the back of my mind, when it happened, I was thinking, you know what? I think this is foreshadowing, and I think Tom's trying to tell us something. And it kind of played out that way. And maybe it wasn't all about Tom after all. Because if anything should have been a wake up call, it's Tom Brady kind of coming off as selfish. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Brooks, have you ever heard a former Patriot or a current Patriot say Tom Brady is anything but a great teammate?
Right. Ridiculous. I hate Tom Brady. He's unbelievable.
Yeah. Tom Brady last year, when they asked him to hand the ball off from week 16 on through the playoffs first, we're going to take it out of your hands first in our offensive approach. He was willing to do it. It was the best opportunity for them to get where they wanted to go. I don't think I've ever seen anybody in sports more committed to winning. And when you talk about the culture of the Patriots, and you hear it from people like Matthew Slater and Devin McCourty, who've been around this organization a long time and are viewed within the locker room walls as leaders equal to Tom, if not even guys with a more profound influence on their younger teammates in many respects than Tom. Those guys, as Slater has said, when you see the best player who's ever done it come in here and work harder than everybody else, how can you not do that? And so Brady has set the tone, along with a couple of the other guys. But Brady for 2 decades has set that tone. I think that's allowed Bill Belichick to have the culture the Patriots have had in those locker room walls and ultimately out on the field. Tom Brady, look, everybody has an ego. And when you're the best to ever do it, and you've played for 20 years under the same coach, certainly you're going to probably have your own ideas of the way you want to see the team and the roster managed. But I think in the end, Tom Brady has always been a team first guy. And again, I'm speaking as the team's broadcaster. I've been covering the games now for 7 years. That's just my impression. That's how I feel about it.
It's subjective. He's been doing it forever, and he never wavers. And it's unbelievable. And in this day and age of, I think, over-glorify, I mean, we've always kind of done it, but really over the top glorification of sports and athletes and people in the business of sports. You would think this is one of the great mysteries of the universe. And I think it probably speaks to Belichick's genius and his incredible bloodless pragmatism. This is me talking, that Brady's in this position. I really feel like Brady just wants a gesture, anything. I want to ask you though, thank you for indulging me on this, because it's so great to have you. But I've heard people say this, and I don't know the answer, but people have said about Tom Brady, he took less for a lot of years, right? And that's what helped the Patriots, that extra money, build the roster over that period of time and win championships and be more competitive. Is that true?
Well, at the time, certainly Tom Brady and his contracts didn't get the market value that other quarterbacks did. I think right now he's like 13th or somewhere in the early teens, if not mid-teens. And last year he played on an incentive-laden contract. And you can also make the case, though, that he got a lot more money up front than many of his contemporaries as well. But I think he generally never played hardball with the Patriots until perhaps this last year, which leads him, of course, as a free agent in mid-March if they don't re-sign him beforehand. But you look at the money the Patriots spend on the middle class of the roster, it's more than other teams. The money that Bill Belichick, for example, invests in special teams and having core guys in that third phase on the Patriots, it exceeds that of most other teams, if not all other teams. And I'm not an economist and I'm not a cap guy, but I think that there is a trade-off. And there has been an ability to extend some guys that, probably would have walked out that door in other ways. Now, the Patriots have always been very sharp with their finances. They won't overpay. And it goes back to the point about value versus cost. But I think, Tom Brady has enabled Bill Belichick to meet the value of some of those players, maybe not the stars necessarily, but other players who are really important in the fabric of that team on and off the field, meet the value with the cost that ultimately he's been able to pay for them.
Tell us about Joe Judge as a head coach.
Yeah, he's intense. He's a guy that, this year, of course, took on added responsibilities as a wide receivers coach for the Patriots. And I think it's very unfair, as some of the national media have done, apparently, to say, the Giants hired the Patriots wide receiver coach. They hired the Patriots special teams coordinator, who's had one of the better units in the league. And although I should say, again, the Patriots really emphasized that area. And
they've done pretty well.
They've built the roster. Yeah, he's had good players and special teams with whom to work. Maybe not necessarily in the return game this year, but certainly when it comes to making plays and covering kicks, etc., and making kicks. But he's intense. He's a guy who played under Jackie Sherrill as a quarterback at Mississippi State. He's from Philadelphia, so he's kind of got that hard scrabble or
Philadelphia,
Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Yeah. No, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's from, I think he's from Lansdale. I think that's in the Philly area. So he went down to Starkville,
right?
Played quarterback there for the Bulldogs under Jackie Sherrill.
That's the
guy with a great college coaching career, and then coached ultimately for Nick Saban at Alabama. Came to the Patriots, learned from a guy like Scott O'Brien, one of the best to ever do it, at least in recent memory, as a special teams coordinator in the NFL. And he's a guy who's very intense. I think he's a very sharp football mind who Belichick has a great deal of respect for. You see and hear, on the NFL films stuff, you hear them too, and you see them during games. They're in constant communication. I think he's a guy that obviously was very appealing to his alma mater, which knew him well. They were going to make him their next head coach. He had an offer waiting for him if he didn't land the Giants job. I was very, very surprised that the news broke yesterday that he was the next head coach of the New York Giants, now head coach of the New York Giants. But I think I would look at him the way people looked at John Harbaugh at the time. And I know the judgment has been cast already in the tabloids and in New York media, in particular, with a lot of Giants fans. But give him some time. I think, and this is no pun intended, he's going to be judged by how he does over time. And I wouldn't discount him because I think he is a really good football mind. And I want to add one thing about the Belichick assistants. I think Brian Flores last year really did a great job with the Dolphins. They won 5 of their last 9 with a roster devoid of talent outside of Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, for example, on offense. And if Joe Judge goes to the Giants and he's his own man, if he's Joe Judge, which I think he's going to be, and doesn't try to be, as some have said about former Belichick assistants, another Bill Belichick can do it. Do it the way that only Bill can do it. And I think Joe Judge stands a real good chance of having a good career and a long career with the Giants. I think, one of the things that, you look at, for example, Matt Patricia versus Brian Flores, Brian was a guy that had other influences, but, when he went to Miami and over the course of the season, Brian's always been his own guy. And I think Matt, in the second year with the Lions, showed signs that, he learned some things from year one in terms of especially the interaction early on with the Detroit media. And I saw a difference, based on what I had read the previous year when we had joint practices, for example, last year to cover when the Patriots and the Lions got together with Matt as the head coach of the Lions. He was very friendly and it was a different demeanor in that media workroom. So, he's a smart guy. He learned from year one. And I think the Joe Judge is going to learn from the experiences of him and some of the others. That's just my expectation. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. I'm not sure how he's going to be in the media cauldron of New York, but I've seen growth in that area. You see it over the course of the Super Bowls the Patriots have been to, because we don't have a lot of exposure to the assistants. But I think he's going to. I'm pulling for him. I hope he does. I hope he does well.
If Josh leaves, who's in the mix for OC? You think? That's
a great question around here, because a lot of people actually thought it was Joe Judge who would be a candidate had Josh gone and Joe stayed. Chad O'Shea is out there. Speaking of the Dolphins, Chad was the wide receivers coach here for a decade, was the OC from Miami, and called a beautiful, brilliant game plan, I thought, against the Patriots in Week 17. And that also maybe tied into the thinking for Belichick moving forward when we talk about the evolution of the offense. Is he going to bring in somebody, and he generally does, from within the pipeline, whether it's somebody who's here in place or somebody who has been outside and comes back like Josh did after his head coaching stint in Denver and then as offensive coordinator with the Rams. Now, Belichick generally has tried to promote from within. But it's going to be a very fascinating choice if Josh moves on to Cleveland.
Could there be kind of a committee the way they do the defense, or I mean, that kind of to me defines the Patriots organization, that it's never been about titles and individuals, that they do that stuff and they do it in a non-traditional way. Could we see that on offense, you think?
Well, when Bill O'Brien took over for Josh, I don't think that Bill had the title of offensive coordinator. I may be wrong, but I don't think he had that title in year one. Flores didn't have the title of defensive coordinator last year. That certainly was a committee effort with Belichick, Flores, Brendan Daly, who was the defensive line coach, and others. This year, I think Bill and Steve Belichick and Gerard Mayo. It's a collaborative effect, and Bill certainly had his imprint on the defense. And, it's one of the things, too, I think that people should keep in mind about Joe Judge and hiring a special teams coach. And Belichick has said this, and I think John Harbaugh has made similar points, if not the same points in the past, championing the concept of hiring a guy from special teams. As a special teams coordinator, you're calling plays, you're organizing a unit, and there are schemes, and they're very specific plays they run on every kick, on every block, on every return. Beyond that, you're working with guys from every position group, in essence, except for the quarterback. So you have to have an understanding of what their roles are on their various units, offense and defense. You have to be able to work with those personalities as disparate as they are. You're coaching guys who represent the entire football team. And I think so often we get caught up, Brooks, in trying to identify the next great play caller on either side of the ball. A head coach has to manage a football team. You're managing 53 personalities, and you have to manage everything that's involved in the game. And I often wonder how guys do it when they're looking at the tablet or they're looking at their call sheet while the defense is on the field. How are they thinking about, okay, we get the stop here, we're going to call the timeout at this stage. If they pick up a first down, this is what we're going to do instead. And I think Joe Judge at least has had that experience as a special teams coordinator for the Patriots that Bill Belichick had with the Giants early on in his career, and that Harbaugh had with the Eagles for so many years.
I love to look at it, but I really think that you cannot give Bob Kraft enough credit, and you kind of alluded it to it, and why wouldn't you? What Joe Judge, if Joe Judge can be his own guy, what's going to happen with the general manager? In my opinion, Joe will probably outlast him, but who knows? We'll see what happens. But what about the owner there? What's going on there? But I think if you look at Patriots coaches who've gone on to be head coaches and they've been generally panned by the media, in the NFL, you really got to look at the owners. You really have to look at what's going on in the front office. That's really important. And in a way, I think, although I'm on Belichick's, how can you not be on Bill Belichick's bandwagon? I really think that you cannot. I mean, this is just me talking. You can't underestimate the comfort level that he would have with the Bob Kraft, and then this transcendent crazy person in Tom freaking Brady. So that's just my you know what? I would keep you all damn day if I could. I can't thank you enough. I got about 50 more questions, but you got to go, man. So
I tend to be pretty wordy. I usually take pretty much all damn day,
dude.
But I know you got some other great guests coming up.
And
you're gonna if you haven't talked to him already, Mike Giardi is a guy that probably can give you even more info. But I know he can give you more informed insight, and probably has a better idea of what's actually going to happen than I do.
And coming up later in the week, we're going to have Tom Curran back, and Bo Curran is the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks so much, Bob. I really appreciate the time.
My pleasure, Brooks. Thanks for having me.
That's Bob Socci, of course, voice of the Patriots. Awesome. That's amazing. He is amazing. What a great guest. And to give us that amount of time, and it's like one of those things, and I'm going to do that with when we have Mike on, and we have Tom on too, and we have Phil Perry on, and we have everybody on from New England and Boston market, man. It's just been unbelievable for this show. It's been amazing. But I'm sitting there talking. I'm like, I got the voice of the Patriots here. I've got to ask him about all my pet theories, right? I mean, the pet theories that I talked to my buddies at BW3 about. All right, did Brady take less money all those years, and they were able to reallocate the money and all that stuff and build a roster, and that's why they went through things like that. So I can't thank Bob for indulging me and you, all of us. And we'll be back tomorrow, and we've got great guests coming up later on in the week. I hope you'll join us. We're here every single weekday at noon Eastern Time, 9 Pacific. For our producer, Cam Smith, I'm Brooks Melchior, live from Los Angeles, saying so long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.